Okay, good morning, everybody. It is a great pleasure and honor to give you all a very warm welcome to this inaugural event of the Rivers project on behalf of the Rector of the University Carlos III and our Governing Council. I am especially glad to salute our distinguished international guests, Mrs. Vicky Tauli-Corpus, former chairperson of the United Nations Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues, and now Special Rapporteur for the United Nations. Judge Belkis Izquierdo, a member of the Consejo Superior de la Judicatura and GEP, Jurisdicción Especial para la Paz, in Colombia. Professor Damba Kemyong, I hope I pronounced your name correctly, head of the anthropology department at the Tribhuvan University in Nepal. And Ms. Nuokam, a member of the Sami Parliament and current chair of the United Nations Permanent Forum of Indigenous Issues. Many thanks for traveling a long way to join us here today and share with us your expertise, your passionate commitment to the promotion and protection of human rights, and also your original perspective on this challenging task. I'd like to extend my hearty welcome to Dr. Guillermo Fernandez Maldonado, who will moderate the panel today. He also traveled a long way from Colombia, where he is currently a deputy representative of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights. He deserves our gratitude not only for being here today, but also for spending his whole professional life at the United Nations in monitoring and denouncing violations of human rights in many different areas, especially in Latin America. Let me ask him to add to my welcome list Lieselotte Viaene, principal investigator of Rivers, and her wonderful team of young researchers. Our university is very grateful to you for bringing and developing here this fascinating interdisciplinary research project. I think that your project opened a window on new, inspiring collective practices and policy initiatives which are gaining momentum in different parts of the developed and developing world in spite of resistance of vested interest and often a death here by politicians. We can call it a new silent spring, as Rachel Carson perhaps would call it if she would have lived long enough to see it. Indeed, something remarkable is on the march out there, something which is pushing the frontier of sustainable development beyond the well-established, though not so well implemented, human right to a healthy environment, something that advocates for the recognition of the fact that nature enjoys legally enforceable rights, and the indigenous communities are the key actors in this process of turning ecosystem from lakes to rivers, from glaciers to coral reefs, into a subject of law. Hopefully, projects like Rivers will contribute to strengthen the awareness of this new approach in our societies. In our little way, our university takes sustainable development seriously. Last year, we officially signed on to the Spanish government action plan for the implementation of the goals of the United Nations Agenda 2030. We are an active member of YERUN, the network of young research universities in Europe, and in this capacity, we have recently called for an ambitious plan by the European Union for investment in research and innovation as a strategic tool for the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. We belong to the Spanish network of LT universities, and in our daily policy and practices, we are strongly committed to equal opportunities in access to high quality education, gender equality, social inclusion, energy efficiency, and international cooperation for development. So we hope to make significant and tangible further progresses in these issues and many other issues in the next few years. Of course, in line with its overall philosophy and inspiration, Rivers too wanted to do its bit to environmental sustainability. So today they have asked for a plastic-free catering with fair trade coffee and a lot of fruits and veggies. This is another way to be path-breaking, no? And perhaps you will be influential enough to have plenty of followers on this route. And I hope you all will enjoy this experience. Once again, welcome to Carlos III. I wish you all a very productive discussion today, and to you, Lieselotte, and your team, I wish you very successful research projects in the years to come. Thank you.
Buenos dias. Good morning, everyone. Stefan hoped the chair of the Department of Social Sciences was announced, but unfortunately he couldn't do it. He's traveling these days, and he asked me to replace him, and I do this with honor and enthusiasm. I'm here to say a few words about our department and how the Rivers project fits into it. We are a very young department. We started in 2013, and we are a strange but very stimulating mix of scholars coming from different fields, including political science, sociology, and economic history. We are skeptical about academic boundaries, and we try to erase them as much as we can, and we love to engage in interdisciplinary research. We believe in cross-field pollination, and in fact a number of projects and papers featured by members of the department are the result of academic collaboration among people with very different trajectories and backgrounds. The area of social sciences at Carlos III University hosts at this moment 3 ERC projects, including the Rivers one. We are delighted to do so, and this is a great opportunity for expanding our intellectual community. Our aim is to create a vibrant group of scholars who investigate about the pressing issues of our time from a comparative and historical perspective. And the Rivers project is a fascinating and challenging addition to this research community. Let me introduce Lieselotte Viaene, the principal investigator of the Rivers project. She is an interdisciplinary scholar. She obtained her PhD in law in 2011 at the University of Ghent in Belgium, but she is also an anthropologist by formation. Her work is on the intersection of these two fields, anthropology and law. She has widely published in journals such as the International Journal of Transitional Justice, Critique of Anthropology, and the International Human Rights Project. Her latest book is Nilma Railal, Pueblos Indígenas y Justicia Transicional, Reflexiones Antropológicas, published by the University of Deusto this year, 2019. But apart from her academic credentials, Lieselotte is also a practitioner, and she has worked extensively in the field. We are delighted to have Lieselotte with us, and we are sure that this project will be groundbreaking and successful in every sense. Thank you very much, Lieselotte.
Muchas gracias, Stefano y Ignacio, por dar esas palabras de bienvenida de parte de la institución de Carlos III. Buenos días y buenos días a todos y a todos acá. Me siento muy afortunada de estar aquí en la Carlos III, en Madrid, con este nuevo proyecto. Doy la bienvenida también a todos los invitados especiales que efectivamente han viajado de lugares muy lejos, de Colombia, de Nepal, de Finlandia, y Vicky, bueno, entre Congo, DRC y Berlín y Estados Unidos, está entre nosotros. También doy la bienvenida a todas las personas que están aquí y también a todas las personas que nos están siguiendo por live stream, por internet. Ese día voy a dar una pequeña introducción a qué es el proyecto y de dónde viene. Lo voy a hacer en inglés por el hecho que pues tanto el español como el inglés son idiomas coloniales y la mayoría del panel no manejamos como primera idioma ni el inglés ni el español. Yo soy de origen de Bélgica y mi idioma materna es flamenco, y la mayoría del panel tiene como segundo idioma es el inglés. Prefiero hacer mis presentaciones en inglés, pero tenemos la traducción simultánea para las personas que no manejan el inglés. Y a lo largo de los 5 años el inglés y el español se va a servir como los idiomas de contacto durante este proyecto, y seguramente en otros eventos el idioma dominante va a ser es el español, pero esta vez yo hago mi presentación en inglés. So I will switch into English now. So good morning, everyone, and very welcome to the launch of this project. I want to welcome, first of all, to Vicky, Guillermo, Anne, Belkis, Dambar, for coming so far to join this launch of this project, and also to everyone here present and following us from somewhere else on this planet. First of all, I want to express my deep gratitude to the European Research Council for granting me this prestigious grant and having the trust that I, as a principal investigator, will be able to work the next 5 years on what is a very deep and challenging and controversial questions that the Rivers Project want to put on the table. As a young and female European researcher, you can't get a higher recognition of your academic career than this kind of a starting grant, and being able to create a team around you to work the next 5 years on topics that are really close to my heart since many years. When I received the notification last year, I entered actually in a state of susto, what we say in Spanish, panic zone, because I never expected to win this grant from the first application. So I'm really happy and really grateful to the Department of Social Science of the University of Carlos III to host this project and my team. And I'm really looking forward to collaborate with all my other colleagues at the social department. And as Stefan already said, our department is very mixed and very international and very interdisciplinary. And since I started here in February, I had already very nice conversations and debates with my colleagues. And I'm really looking forward for the next 5 years and probably beyond to continue with this a dialogue. So the Rivers Project, the subtitle is Water/Human Rights Beyond the Human ? And I know lawyers in the room and elsewhere who are following this presentation, don't forget to breathe. Because I know river questions, one of the most fundamental dogmas in the human rights world, the human of the human rights. And the other titles are Indigenous Water Ontologies, Pre-Legal Encounters, and Interlegal Translation. But I will come back to that a bit further in my talk. As some of you might know, I'm also a yoga teacher. And what I want to do in this project is putting human rights in a headstand. So I guess you have already seen that kind of fancy pictures of headstands in the mountains, headstands on the beach, headstands on the subboards. Well, that's not me, but we're going to do the next 5 years, putting the human rights framework within a headstand, within the academia. A headstand is a bit scary at the first time, because we are not used to be upside down. But it has many physical and emotional benefits, which I won't share because this is not a yoga class. But believe me, it's really nice to see the world upside down. So I'm really looking forward to the next 5 years of practicing this human rights headstand. So River's main question is, to what extent can international human rights law come to grips with pre-legal water realities? And next week I will start teaching in the Master of Geopolitics and Political Strategy on a course on qualitative research methods. And the first class we will work on the topic is, how do you get from an idea to a research question? And in the next 25 minutes I would like to share with you parts of my journey to come to this research question, for which the ERC gave me €1.5 million to find an answer on. So as a sole criteria, selection criteria for a grant scheme of the ERC is excellent, apparently I wrote a really good question. So I guess most of you have already heard about the emerging legal framework, the one of granting rights to rivers and mountains and the Amazon. It goes from New Zealand to India to Australia to Ecuador to Colombia to Argentina, and I guess that at some point also here in Europe, one judge will grant rights to a river. So, however, when I started thinking about this ERC research proposal in January 2017, this legal hype was not here yet. And my main concern was a bit more on, where do I see myself in the next 5 years? Plan A was going to Bali, setting up my own yoga and meditation retreat center. Plan B was trying to put the puzzle in place, which have been fascinating me since I started as a young anthropologist working in Guatemala with Maya indigenous survivors of the genocide. As you see, I opted for Plan B. Well, now I'm here. So where does River's research question and its research design, which is a bottom-up empirical and dialoguing research design, come from? The research context of rivers are Colombia, Nepal, and the UN International Human Rights Protection System. But what is River's state of the art? What is the part of it? And in order to answer this question, I need to position myself, because that's what we do as anthropologists. Being self-reflective and explaining where we speak from. So therefore, I will use the image of a river itself. As a part of the setup and the consolidation of this project, in August, I went with my team on a retreat, more or less yoga style. And by the way, I'm not the only yoga teacher in the team, so who knows what's going to happen the next 5 years. We went to the Catalan Pyrenees to have a training with ULEX, a training center specialized in adult training of people involved in social movements working on social justice, just as climate change, LGBT, and so on. And as part of the exercise of consolidating the team and having a visioning, and also to understand where each of us come from, they asked us to draw, with no words, a river from how we got to the Rivers Project, with the different turns in our lives, and how we ended up all together here in Madrid. My river started when I was 12 years old when it comes to this topic. Now I'm 40, but no worries, I'm not going to go to all my life stories and all my life events. So once in a while I will jump into a time machine. But I want to share some of these key moments of this long journey that brought me to rivers, and key question, because It is important to recognize that this kind of deep and controversial questions does not pop up in someone's mind, nor that we as researchers are fixed entities and keep on thinking the same thing during 30 years of our research. Those key moments are actually a mixture of feelings of being intrigued by something that you see as anthropologists in the field, but also of deep shocks over the years, and consternation during my work as an anthropologist. So, as I said, even though the research project context are Colombia, Nepal, and the UN, the source or the spring of this project rivers is based in my work as a young anthropologist in Guatemala. In 2002, I went to Guatemala for my master thesis in anthropology to research if restorative justice could support Guatemala's post-conflict process at the local level of indigenous communities. After 6 weeks doing preliminary field research, talking and mainly listening to a lot of indigenous leaders, I came to a preliminary conclusion that indigenous justice systems should be taken much more seriously in dealing with the aftermath and supporting indigenous authorities and practices than excluding them, what was then the case. In 2006, I went back to the same region, the Maya Kikchi territory, in the framework of my PhD field research in law, to understand from a Maya Kikchi perspective visions on justice, reparation, reconciliation, truth, and memory. I spent almost 2 years working with victims, perpetrators, widows, spiritual guides, elders, most of the time in very remote communities cut off from all outer communication. I was a young European woman, white, spending more time in remote communities, listening to elders and participating in rituals and ceremonies than doing something else. Guatemala is a country that marks you in many positive ways, but also the negative ways. But today I just want to highlight some of the positive experiences. So Rivers is rooted, conceived, and given birth with the Maya Kikchi. I would like to share with you like 3 important turns, which are a mixture of being intrigued and being deeply shocked in this Guatemalan part of my rivers to the project rivers. Listening to the Kikchi, I had a lot of difficulties to understand when people talked about Dios, or God, as they also refer to the mountains, the corn, the rivers. Why, I asked, because many Maya Kikchi are Christian, Catholic, or evangelic. So I thought God should be transcendent somewhere up there in the sky. But no, they said, because everything is alive, kyo. Rivers, the sacred mountains, can be sad, can be happy, can be angry. And they looked at me with a face, but what stupid question are you asking? Of course, rivers, mountains are also God. One of my main conclusions of my PhD research back then in 2010 was that the armed conflict, genocide, did not only violate individual human rights, but also the collective and the spiritual dimension. When the Kikchi were talking about the sacred cornfields that were burned down by the army, they did not see it only as a violation of the right to food, but also of the violation of the dignity of the sacred corn. And yes, the corn wept a lot during the war because it was burned down alive without any guilt. At that moment, I was writing about knowledge and practices embedded in different epistemological and ontological frameworks. But I was doing a PhD in law, in human rights. So I felt quite uncomfortable writing about the internal logic of the cosmos, invisible spiritual forces, spirituality. Fortunately, I had a die-hard human rights lawyer who loved my empirical work as a PhD supervisor. Second turn in my work, my PhD thesis was framed within the discussion of how universal human rights can accommodate cultural diversity, focusing on transitional justice and indigenous peoples. And the main theoretical proposal is through an intercultural dialogue. In Guatemala, I realized that this theoretical proposal of creating an intercultural dialogue is faced with many constraints, practical obstacles, but also at a much deeper level. One is for just seeing translation. Most of the people with whom I worked with don't speak Spanish. And in their language, to be, the verb to be, ser o estar, does not exist. So you can imagine how was my work trying to understand from their vision what is justice, reconciliation, and so on. And as I shared yesterday in the seminar on transitional justice, what I saw during my research is that, for example, the National Human Rights Program in Guatemala had no idea how to translate the key concept of resarcimiento in Spanish into Maya Kikchi, which are the main beneficiaries of the project, of the reparation program. Third, I was during my time in Guatemala deeply shocked by the deep racism that exists in the country towards indigenous communities. In the society, in the state, yes, even in academia and among national and international human rights organizations. Indigenous knowledge forms and practices were and are still neglected and oppressed. To put it in a blunt way, mental health organizations prefer to bring in European-trained psychologists to work on mental health of indigenous survivors than strengthening indigenous practices of healing. I was never able to fully understand that practice, honestly. Also, in those years, I participated in many events, academic or organized by policymakers, about the topic of legal pluralism, indigenous justice systems, but most of the time without any presence of indigenous authorities at the discussion table. Or if there was some space, it was at the end of the event, just 10 minutes, translation included. So, of course, as you can now imagine, it's not a coincidence why, for this launch of this project, I invited leading indigenous leaders from different parts of the world to be part in this panel. And finally, indeed, my intellectual thinking has been deeply influenced by my time with the Kikchi, but it goes much, much deeper. These indigenous survivors have trained me and transformed me in the way I am thinking and standing and being now in the world. Without their warmth, wisdom, and love, I would not be standing here, and rivers would not exist. Since my childhood, I'm stuttering, so talking in front of a group of strangers was obviously not my thing at all. But during my time in the communities, the Kikchis always asked me to talk in meetings and gatherings. As you probably know, indigenous peoples have a strong, very strong oral tradition. And I need to say, I literally died a couple of times with my little paper in my hand with my bullet points because I had to talk in front of everyone. But for them, for indigenous peoples, the word is sacred. So they listened. They did not interrupt me and were very patient, always. It was the first time in my life that I felt completely accepted, not excluded, not discriminated, because I didn't talk fluently. Without them, I would not have the confidence to talk now in front of you in such a fluent way. For all of these experiences and much more, I'm dedicating this research project to the Maya Kikchi people, elders who have trained me since 2002 and transformed me in the person that I'm currently are. These experiences will serve me as an internal compass in this huge new academic endeavor. It will guide me where I want to go with this project. A next important turn in my river to rivers is my time at the Office of the High Commissioner of Human Rights in Ecuador with Guillermo between 2010 and 2013. During those years, I got further intrigued about the huge challenge related with putting into practice the theoretical proposal of intercultural dialogue and the one of intercultural interpretation of human rights. Together with Guillermo, a team of local academic consultants and the then Special Rapporteur of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, James Anaya, we gave technical advice to the Ministry of Justice and the Assembly regarding the draft law about the coordination and cooperation between indigenous justice systems and ordinary justice. Ecuador has a beautiful and one of the most progressive constitutions in the world from a human rights perspective, on paper. It implies a deep rupture with Western liberal and Eurocentric legal culture. It puts indigenous jurisdiction at the same level as official state law. It recognizes as the first constitution rights of nature. And its in preamble, it includes indigenous collective concepts such as kumatsau. A fascinating experience during those years, but extremely difficult conversations with lawyers, judges, and public attorneys. My work at the UN made me realize how valuable it is not only to talk to the choir, but also to those who are the so-called other side. This project, Rivers, wants to do the same. I find it just too easy to always group up with our like-minded academic peers. During my years at Ecuador, my own academic thinking got also more permeated with decolonial theory, a vivid academic discussion very present in Latin America. But once again, the big question remains how to decolonize. The Constitution of Ecuador is a huge step in this decolonial legal path, but once again, its implementation is very complicated. Now I will jump again. The next turn in my river to rivers is my return to Guatemala in 2014. I was invited to collaborate with Maya Kikchi communities to elaborate a research and policy report on the possible human rights violations that would cause a construction of the second biggest dam in Guatemala on the Chicxoy River. This is in the Chicxoy River on the picture. In Kekchi territory. In fact, the communities with whom I worked in early 2000 were threatened to be displaced again. It felt that the Kekchi land and river was calling me back. Listening to the Kekchi this time again, I learned that this hydroelectric dam would be another Nimla Rahilal, an expression that they normally use to refer to the genocide and denotes the deep individual, collective, and spiritual suffering and pain. I quote, "Now we humans and the sacred mountains and river will suffer again, this time not by massacres by the army, but by killing the life of the river. She is the mother. The side rivers are her kids. The fertile soul around the river is the father. This family will die." Based on these experiences and reflecting on the first groundbreaking legal decisions of New Zealand, India, and Colombia to grant rights to rivers, I wrote a short blog, The Seeds of Rivers, actually, when I was in Nimlahakok, the community where I have spent a lot of time of my life. And I wanted to say in that blog and make the point across that from an orthodox legal perspective, the recognition of rivers and living beings and legal entities on one side, and the emerging human rights to water at the other side are two different legal concepts. However, in an indigenous, non-dualistic conception, everything is not only interrelated and interdependent, but is alive, meaning that natural resources should be equally protected as life. So from an indigenous perspective, granting rights to rivers is not that fancy. I want to skip the work that I did during my Marie Curie research previously to this ERC, which was on indigenous epistemologies on water in Guatemala and Colombia. But I want to share with you a bit, this was a bit the different parts and turns in my work and how I get to rivers. But part of the selection procedure for this kind of ERC, the pre-selected candidates needs to go to Brussels for an interview with a panel of international experts, 18. And I had 8 minutes to present, let's say, to sell my project. And during the preparation, I had a consultant who forced me to put down the state of the art, which I was written in 15 pages, in a drawing. And her argument was that I needed to mention all this in just 1 minute and one slide to avoid that I would get lost in the question and answer round after my presentation. As you can see, there are many, many turns in this whole story to get here. So I have to say it was a really tough exercise to just put things which are in my head, in my body, in my experience in a graph. So this is the famous graph. And very quick, so Rivers Project will create empirical dialogues from indigenous perspectives, working on the grassroots levels of indigenous communities, at the level of the state in Colombia and Nepal, and also in the UN, trying to contribute from an empirical bottom-up experience towards the literature and academic debates on human rights and cultural pluralism, on decolonizing human rights, however, recognizing that even those bodies with their theoretical insight are still entrenched in anthropocentric boundaries. That's why that one of my friends and colleagues said, well, maybe you should put that line so it's really clear that those are still caught up in that nature and that modern divide between human and nature. And the project wants to contribute from an empirical perspective to the ongoing debates of political ontology and the ontological turn in social science. So what is now the groundbreaking approach of this ERC? Well, as I said, we're going to work in 3 contexts at different levels, trying to create a South-South dialogue and a North-South dialogue. And over the next 5 years, and I'm really grateful to the ERC to have 5 years, because that's a huge chunk of amount, and as an anthropologist, that is just fantastic, because we need time, because we go to the field with very open questions, and then God knows what happened at the field. So what we would like to create over the next 5 years is an ecology of legal water knowledges and practices, reconceptualizing human rights to water from below and moving beyond the famous anthropocentric human rights dogma. So you might question, but why Nepal? Why Asia? Where does that fit in this whole river that I already shared? Well, that's not a long river, but let's say that after my large Latin American experiences, I ended up in Asia traveling around, yoga, meditation, Tibetan Buddhism, retreats, long time retreats. And I got intrigued again about the concept and the practices in Asian philosophies on interdependency and interconnectedness between humans and nature. And I saw so many, well, traveling in Thailand and Cambodia and so on, and in Nepal, I saw many similarities between indigenous thinking in Asia and in Latin America. And as this is a new start, a new research project, and it has the idea to open up a new research horizon, that's why that Asia is also part of the project. And of course, why Nepal? Well, Nepal's constitution of 2015 has recognized indigenous peoples, and is the only country in Asia that has ratified the ILO Convention 169. And similar to Colombia, it is also a so-called post-conflict society. Of course, there are many other debates connected with what we try to do. Political ecology, the whole debate on Anthropocene, the SDGs, climate change, critical geography, and so on. And I'm pretty sure that over the 5 years, this big river might have some side rivers, but what is needed to do a headstand is being focused, concentrating, and not too much extra movements. Otherwise, you fall down. And I know what it is. I hurt my neck once, and it's not recommendable. So how are we going to do it? And I talk we, because the ERC gives principal investigators the huge privilege to build up his or her or their own team. And quickly, before I will introduce my team members, is that the research design is split up into research streams that needs to interconnect over the 5 years. As you see, I like more circles than boxes. So the first research stream is more focused on indigenous visions and practices and wants to go beyond water as a natural resource and as a human rights. And the second research stream is focused on the UN human rights system and wants to go towards counter-hegemonic water knowledge and norm production within the UN system. So I now want to invite my team members to the stage so they can explain and share with you what they're going to do the next 5 years. As we did the river exercise all together in the mountains, it was really intriguing and fascinating to see how each of their own rivers also connected with my own river. And I'm really confident and I'm really looking forward to have a wonderful collaboration over the next 5 years. And I'm pretty sure that we're gonna complement each other and that we might even come up with even more other questions, but we will see. So I would like to invite Marta, Kelly, Paulo, and Seljan. And I also want to thank them all for supporting in the whole preparation of this lounge, because this event is just one of the many events that we did this week. And in particular, I want to thank to Marta, whose role is double in the project. She is the manager of the project, but also postdoctoral researcher. And thanks to her willpower and perseverance, we have all this set up. So if you could come up. So when it comes to research stream 1, then Seljan will work on the Nepali case, and Kelly will work on the Colombian case, and Paulo will also work partially on the Colombian case, while Marta will work on the UN level, also together with Paulo. And my work will be to bring all those circles together, and obviously also to do some field research in all those countries and spaces at some point in those 5 years.
Thank you very much for accepting us to such an incredible project. I will just very shortly introduce myself and what I will be doing in rivers. And Kelly and I will be doing similar things. So my name is Seljan, I'm from Turkey. I am an anthropologist. And before coming to rivers, I have been working in northern Mongolia with nomadic reindeer herder and hunter Duka community, studying their relationship with landscape and animals, shortly. The thing is, I think all anthropologists know today that when you're working with indigenous people, even though you are not, included in legal procedures and everything, you end up seeing that almost everywhere around the world, they have serious problems because of governments, companies, or so-called environmental protection projects. And the same thing happens to the community I work with in Mongolia, actually, that they are traditionally hunters, but their area was declared as a national park, and suddenly it was forbidden to hunt there, and they just didn't know what to do because it was the way they lived. And at the time, then I realized that even though I don't know anything about law, I had to know about it, actually, because, as I said, these things are happening all the time. And there was not even a procedure in court, actually. They are still in the same situation. They don't know what to do. The government started giving them some money as compensation, but, well, you don't really have markets in the forest, so the situation is still the same. But why I'm telling the story is because when I saw Rivers Call, then I was like, wow, this is the perfect combination, because I'm interested in indigenous people and their way of seeing life, but then legal aspects are also very important in today's world. So this is why I'm actually very excited to be working in Nepal with indigenous people again, but also learning more about legal perspective and human rights issues. And very shortly, where is our research stream?
Yeah, you want to go back?
I was like,
okay,
from here.
Yeah.
Okay.
You want to go to Wikipedia?
Okay. Okay, this one. So, if we explain from this, I will be working in Nepal for work package A and B. So what's going to happen is that we will be working with indigenous communities, doing classical ethnographic fieldwork, living with them and doing lots of interviews, and trying to understand how they perceive water and landscape. What is water for them, or what is rivers for them? And meanwhile, there are some cases going on in the courts, and we will be also, like this is work package B, we will be also doing observations and interviews with judges and the whole procedure in the courts about how the system is working, if the indigenous ontologies are taken into consideration or not. So this is more or less work package A and B that I will be working, and also Kelly will be working on the same. Yes, so maybe Kelly can now introduce. Yes, thank you.
Aku finse Janscoinsa, Ukoyesea que el Joana Kilcuea, Tierra entre Tehuestu. Buenos días a todos y a todas. Pues yo soy Kelly Joana Kilcue Vivas, pertenezco al pueblo Nasa de la zona de Tierra Adentro, Cauca, Colombia. Pues mi experiencia con pueblos indígenas, pues soy de un pueblo indígena, pues que milenariamente ha sido guerrero y pues que le ha apostado siempre a estos procesos de resistencia, de paz, de armonía en los territorios. He trabajado desde siempre, desde que tengo memoria, en los procesos de mi pueblo, en las movilizaciones, en las asambleas. He trabajado con la Organización Nacional Indígena de Colombia, ONIC, en un proceso de recolección de memoria, pues, de todo pues, todas las afectaciones del conflicto armado a los pueblos indígenas. Estoy aquí en Rivers porque creo profundamente en que los pueblos indígenas también podemos apostarle a un proceso de resistencia desde la investigación y desde cómo transformar pues, esas situaciones y esas problemáticas que se dan en los territorios también desde este ámbito. Yo básicamente voy a trabajar en estos dos, en el paquete A y B, pero sobre todo pues voy a hacer énfasis en el A, porque mi otro compañero va a hablar sobre el B, sobre peritajes antropológicos. Bueno, y yo voy a estar sobre todo en el A, donde pues vamos a hablar sobre ontologías indígenas. Aquí básicamente lo que vamos a hacer y el reto que tenemos es de alguna manera conceptualizar y dar esa visión desde los pueblos indígenas que es tan distinta a la occidental, pues como ven los pueblos indígenas el tema del agua. Y ya paso la palabra a mi compañero Pablo para que nos hable un poco de su trabajo. Muchas gracias.
Gracias, buenos días a todos y a todas. Mi nombre es Pablo Ilich Vaca. Yo soy colombiano de origen y mi formación inicial es como abogado, y luego a nivel de posgrado hice un doctorado en sociología del derecho. He tenido el privilegio de trabajar durante los últimos 15 años con pueblos indígenas, sobre todo en la región andina, en mi propio país, en Colombia, pero también en Perú y en Bolivia. Y también he tenido la fortuna de tener interlocución con líderes indígenas de Estados Unidos y de Australia. En ese sentido, obviamente, el proyecto Rivers es un espacio de resonancias y de magnetismos, y me siento muy privilegiado de compartir con un equipo interdisciplinario y con un equipo de grandes calidades humanas. Básicamente, digamos, también me siento afortunado porque mi investigación de doctorado resuena por muchos lados con el proyecto. El título de mi tesis de doctorado fue Indigenizing International Law, indigenizando el derecho internacional, y básicamente la idea de ese proyecto era, digamos, sabiendo que los pueblos indígenas han hecho un gran esfuerzo por aprender y por utilizar el discurso de los derechos humanos y del derecho internacional, porque nosotros como abogados y como antropólogos no podemos tomarnos en serio las cosmologías indígenas para interpretar el derecho internacional. Y básicamente en ese estudio tengo 3 estudios de caso, uno que es una interlocución con la antropóloga aymara Silvia Rivera Cusicanqui, que es una persona que ha tenido la capacidad de moverse con mucha agilidad entre el mundo indígena y el mundo no indígena y que es muy buena haciendo traducción, digamos, cultural. El segundo tiene que ver con un líder indígena en Colombia de principios del siglo XX, del pueblo de Kelly, del pueblo Nasa, Manuel Quintín Lame, y básicamente en ese estudio muestro que toda su interpretación de una ley colonial, de la ley 89 de 1890, proviene de la cosmología NASA. Y el tercero es un estudio sobre el concepto de la formación de nación en Colombia y del genocidio a los pueblos indígenas, teniendo una interlocución con un ex vicepresidente y con un presidente de la Organización Nacional Indígena de Colombia. Y en ese sentido, digamos, también me siento muy privilegiado de estar trabajando en el paquete B del proyecto, que tiene que ver con traducción interlegal y con los procesos de judicialización al nivel doméstico, porque de alguna manera también, digamos, me va a permitir seguir refinando como mi propio marco de acción. Y estaré también trabajando con Marta en el paquete D, donde ya tuvimos una primera experiencia con Lieselotte en Ginebra, donde tuvimos la oportunidad de escuchar a la relatora Vicky, su último informe sobre justicia indígena. Y bueno, en ese sentido, entonces, Marta también estará trabajando ahí y le dejo a Marta. Gracias.
Bueno, pues hola, voy a seguir hablando en español, ya que hemos empezado. Yo soy Marta Rica, soy, bueno, como ha dicho Lieselotte, la gestora del proyecto y también postdoc, compartiendo el paquete D, que luego os explicaré brevemente. Y bueno, por alusiones creo que yo también soy la otra profesora de yoga del proyecto. Y bueno, eso es parte por eso he acabado en Rives, porque desde hace muchos años estoy en un movimiento colectivo de yoga que, bueno, que no solo se queda en el yoga, ¿no?, sino es un poco cambio social y que en muchas cosas resuena con Rives, por muchas razones. Y bueno, yo soy de Madrid, en mi experiencia pues se ha centrado más en temas de gobernanza de agua. Estudié Ciencias del Medio Ambiente, soy mi tesis aquí en España con Fermina, que estoy feliz de ver, sobre la gobernanza de agua, y siempre me han llamado mucho, bueno, la atención, ¿no?, las acciones colectivas y, bueno, manejo de bienes comunes, y ahora pues retar eso de qué son bienes comunes y cómo enlaza con una base de derechos humanos. He tenido experiencia pues tanto en investigación como en cooperación, he trabajado también en la FAO, he trabajado con organizaciones de la sociedad civil en Bolivia en temas de gestión del agua. Estoy viviendo en Bolivia y allí pues también pude empaparme de cómo es el hecho de tener en una constitución lo que es el derecho humano al agua, movimientos indígenas desde allá, y un poco empezó mi proceso de decolonizar, y ahora es lo que quiero continuar para poder hacer la investigación que tenemos en el paquete de trabajo de C, que es sobre la producción de conocimiento internacional sobre normas de agua. Y ya que lo tenemos, la principal pregunta de investigación de este paquete de trabajo es hasta qué punto las concepciones indígenas están reconocidas e incorporadas en el desarrollo de los derechos humanos. Nos estamos centrando sobre todo en el derecho humano al agua, que está como bastante acotado por muchas razones, y bueno, lo que vamos a hacer es explorar un poco todo el proceso de producción de normas a ese nivel, no solo el derecho humano al agua, también seguiremos un poco el trabajo del relator también de medio ambiente. Ya tuvimos oportunidad de conocer al relator del derecho humano al agua y el saneamiento, a Leo Heller. Y bueno, el principal campo de acción va a ser las Naciones Unidas, el Comité de Derechos Económicos, Sociales y Culturales en Ginebra, el trabajo de los relatores y, bueno, y el trabajo también de las personas que están aquí, que yo tengo muchas ganas de escuchar. Así que no me voy a enrollar más y muchas gracias a todos, todas.
Bueno, muchas gracias, Kelly, Paulo, Seljan y Marta. Ya estamos todos muy emocionados de poder avanzar con el proyecto, que ya estamos, bueno, un par de meses de arranque. And just to finish the presentation of rivers, so I think it was already clear that this project does not take for granted what water is and what it means. And that we want to contribute to the huge debate about the relationship between us, humans, and nature, which is the most pressing question in this century. Though at the same time, as already shared a little bit over those past 15, 20 years, I have witnessed quite a lot of hypes or creations of paradigm shifts. Before I was an anthropology student, I was a criminology student, and that's where, at that moment, there was huge debates going on in criminal justice system to create a paradigm shift to restorative justice. That's why actually that my first master thesis was from that framework of restorative justice. Then when I was doing my PhD on transitional justice and indigenous peoples, we had huge debates in the legal field about the mobilization of traditional justice systems in dealing with an aftermath of a genocide. Rwanda, the Gacaca tribunals, and then the whole hype supported with the international development of supporting in traditional ways of reconciliation of justice in Africa, like in Mozambique, in northern part of Uganda, and so on. And now we are in the middle of the legal hype of human rights, well, of rights to nature, human, non-human, other than human. So I'm really grateful again to have this opportunity to further explore and deepen all those questions. I see it like peeling of an onion. We started decades ago with the subaltern studies, then with the post-colonial turn, then the decolonial turn, then the epistemological turn. Now we are in the ontological turn. Maybe we can get finally to the bottom and to our Western, modern, entre comillas, vision of the nature-culture divide. And I want to end with two things that I learned over the years, and that's expressing gratitude and also putting an attention. I learned from the Maya Kikchis to always express gratitude to Mother Earth and to all sentient beings around us for everything that happens in our lives, all the positive, all the negative things. And I'm pretty sure that also this project will have its ups and downs and its discussions and its tensions internally, externally. But I see it as part of the journey, a journey that started so many years ago. So I'm extremely grateful to have you all here and all other people. And I'm extremely grateful to all the people around me that have supported me in Europe, outside Europe, from Latin America, indigenous, non-indigenous people, to support me in this huge endeavor. And then finally is putting an intention, placing an intention for this project and what I would like to see the next 5 years. And as I said, I hope that we from this project can contribute to these pressing questions about our relationship from humans, non-humans, and nature. Thank you very much, and I'm really looking forward to hear your comments and reflections on this project, and probably also questions or remarks of how we could put forward this whole endeavor, this academic work. And I would like to invite to Guillermo. He will be the moderator of this panel. Besides being my ex-boss from the UN in Ecuador, Guillermo is currently the Deputy Representative of the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights in Colombia, which is the biggest field office of the High Commissioner. He has been working, well, already in Ecuador, in Guatemala, in Nicaragua. You started in El Salvador. You're originally from Peru. Well, I have to say that in those almost 3 years being in Ecuador and working with Guillermo, I learned so many things that you don't learn in the academic world, and I'm extremely grateful that even after all those years that we're still in contact and that we are dialoguing. Like yesterday we had a really interesting internal meeting with you and with Belkis, and I really highly appreciate all your support that you have been giving me, even if I left the office a couple of years ago. Thank you.
Bueno, muchas gracias, Lieselotte, por la invitación, por este privilegio. Estoy ejerciendo mi derecho a lengua materna. Ahora vamos a tener el privilegio de escuchar a Vicky, que como todos y todas ustedes saben, es la relatora especial sobre derechos de los pueblos indígenas, que creo que es una posición de particular importancia, no solo por la trayectoria que voy a comentar de Vicky, sino que además de la experticia, tal vez es la persona mejor enterada de lo que sucede en el planeta respecto de las obligaciones de los estados sobre los derechos de los pueblos indígenas, que está funcionando y que no está funcionando. Y es una de las mayores autoridades, por lo tanto, a nivel mundial, para hacer recomendaciones respecto de esta brecha enorme entre lo que se reconoce y lo que efectivamente se implementa. Uno de los principales objetivos, yo diría, de todo el sistema, y en esto en cabeza de Vicky, es no el qué, sino cómo lo hacemos. Vicky es una líder indígena del pueblo Cancanae y Gorot de la región cordillera de Filipinas, consultora de desarrollo social, dirigente indígena, líder de sociedad civil, experta en derechos humanos, servidora pública y defensora de los derechos de las mujeres en Filipinas. Fue la primera presidenta del Foro Permanente para las Cuestiones Indígenas entre el 2005 y 2010. Como líder indígena, se comprometió activamente en la redacción y adopción de la Declaración de Naciones Unidas sobre Derechos de los Pueblos Indígenas en el 2007. Ayudó a construir el movimiento de pueblos indígenas en la cordillera de Filipinas como joven dirigente ya en la década del 70. También a organizar pueblos indígenas en el ámbito comunitario para luchar en contra de los proyectos en la época de la dictadura de Marcos, respecto a una represa hidroeléctrica en el río Chico de la Corporación de Recursos Celofil. Y de hecho lograron detener el proyecto. Fundadora, directora ejecutiva de la Fundación TAPTEVA, Centro Internacional de Investigación sobre Políticas y Educación de Pueblos Indígenas, ha fundado además y dirigido varias ONGs que trabajan en capacitación, en cambio climático, promoción de pueblos indígenas y derechos de las mujeres. Ha sido experta en la Oficina de Alta Comisionada para los Derechos Humanos, ha servido como presidenta relatora del Fondo de Contribuciones Voluntarias para las Poblaciones Indígenas y es además asesora indígena y de género de la Red del Tercer Mundo y miembro del Comité para el Desarrollo de la Sociedad Civil de Organizaciones de Naciones Unidas. Podemos seguir leyendo, pero creo que con esto alcanza. Y creo que es el momento, a partir de Vicky y luego hacia adelante, de un ejercicio que empezamos en días anteriores, pero muy centrado en el proyecto, ¿no? Con toda la experiencia y experticia que se tiene, ¿no? ¿Cómo podemos alentar, criticar, adelantarnos a lo que se van a enfrentar sobre la base de su enorme experiencia? No creo que haya habido iniciativas en este sentido antes. Eso no lo hace más fácil, no tal vez más difícil, pero Vicky, estamos en tus manos.
Thank you very much, Guillermo, and thank you very much, Lieselotte, for your sharing the whole background of this project. It's very, for me, this is a very interesting project, precisely because, as you mentioned in the introduction, I cut my activism teeth in a struggle that we had against a big dam project in the Philippines, in my region, which would have displaced around 300,000 indigenous peoples. And so we fought against this dam project funded by the bank. And that's when we learned about the UN, because we didn't know that there was such a thing as the UN, except when you go celebrate it October 24, but we didn't know exactly what it does, no? So we cannot find justice back home, so we went to the UN and started work on the UN working group on indigenous populations, and that's when we started to help presenting of course, drafting the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. And as I move, through the years, as you mentioned, I became the chair of the Permanent Forum. Actually, when I was the chair of the Permanent Forum, it was from 2004 to 2009, and Bartolome Clavero and myself and Carlos Mamani, we decided to work together to develop this paper on the whole issue of the rights of nature vis-a-vis the indigenous people's rights, no? Because I did this because I was so shocked when I went to the inauguration of Evo Morales when he became the president, and I was there in Tiwanaku, and he says, the era of human rights is over. Now it is the era of the rights of nature. And I said, oh my God, this is going to be something that we will have to be looking at. And so this project is very much going to help us in terms of course, challenging as well as seeing what are the opportunities, but as well as the risks when you talk about the rights of nature without even taking into account the rights of indigenous peoples. No? So, and then of course, along the years, in fact, recently, maybe 2 months ago, I was in the World Water Forum in Sweden, and I was asked to speak there. And I spoke about my direct experience as an Igorot in managing the waters in our own communities. That when we grow up, our key responsibility is to make sure that the water sources are clean, but also to make sure that when we have irrigation water for the rice fields, that these are distributed equally to all the fields, because otherwise some other people will be disadvantaged. So we call it mananum, and as kids we grow up with that. In some nights, each family is assigned to go and watch the irrigation water, and to direct all the the water to the different irrigation canals. So it's something that is like we are born with, and I guess for many indigenous peoples it's the same. So when we talk about waters or the rights of nature, it's really the participation, the contribution of indigenous peoples is going to be crucial in this, because it's the direction is either indigenous peoples are going to be further marginalized by all these modern systems of irrigation, of even of new legal frameworks, the rights of nature, and in the process, they will not be able to protect their rights to self-determination and the rights to lands, territories, and resources, as well as the right to their traditional knowledge systems and practices. No? So that's the first thing that I'd like to say, that there is no way that such a project can move without the full and effective participation of indigenous people. So I'm glad that in your team, you also have some indigenous peoples, and many people also have experiences with our lives. The other thing is, of course, I made a report in 2016. I made a report on conservation and the impacts on indigenous people's rights. And I made this precisely because I received complaints a lot of times from indigenous peoples complaining about how these conservation organizations have displaced them, marginalized them from their traditional livelihoods, prevented them from going to their sacred sites. And I was so upset about this, and I said, okay, let's make a report about this. So my report was presented before the General Assembly, and actually I presented this report again few days ago in Berlin because there was a big conference on African indigenous peoples and conservation. And I just came from a official visit to Congo Republic, and I've seen firsthand, and I talked with the people, the people who were called pygmies in the past, but now they are called indigenous peoples, who told me all about the stories of how the eco guards of the government and the conservation organizations have been torturing them, bringing them to prison, and they are so scared and of all these eco guards. So that remains to be the problem until today, that these conservation initiatives, no matter how the IUCN has developed a Durban Accord and a Durban Plan of Action in 2003, saying that indigenous peoples have to become effectively involved in conservation initiatives, design, implementation, management, etc. I mean, that's like more than 15 years ago, and the situation hasn't changed very much. So that I think is what needs to be interrogated. Why is it that these conservation organizations, the one who are pushing strongly for the rights of nature, are so oblivious and it's so difficult for them to really respect indigenous people's rights? You know, and the reason why there was a conference in Berlin, where I came from, is because of the WWF, the reports of the WWF torturing indigenous peoples. The eco guards supported by WWF have been torturing and committing the worst kinds of impunities against the indigenous peoples in the Congo Basin. No? So that is the picture, and I think that when you do this project, that really has to be made visible in this, because is pushing for the rights to nature going to stop these kinds of treatment and human rights violations? No? Is this project going to really push further for the better implementation of the rights of indigenous peoples to self-determination and to their lands, territories, and resources? And is it going to really challenge significantly this paradigm of conservation, fortress conservation, which continues up to now? You know, in my conclusion in my report, I said that, you know, despite the Durban Accord, despite the conservation initiative and human rights, indigenous peoples are still being subjected to the worst forms of human rights violations, both by the state as well as by the conservation organizations who are providing that money to the state. And so the donors have to be very careful, because Germany is providing like 2 billion, they said, in Africa for protected areas, and they plan to expand protected areas 2 times the number of protected areas. Now they will expand it, and we are expressing our serious concern that you are going to do this, and you know that they are going to expand. That means, what does that mean for indigenous peoples, no? And then of course the other point that I also stress, and I heard this, there were very good panelists in the meeting in Berlin. One was a panelist who is a German lawyer and an anthropologist, and he had a book about conservation as a colonialism and continuation of imperialism. And there was another Kenya guy who spoke, and he said it's true, because up to now we have protected areas, but this is protecting the white people. It's also protecting, of course, the animals that they love, but it's violating all the rights of the black people. You know, so it's that's what we are seeing more and more in Africa. So of course we're just talking here about forests, but this includes water as well. You know, we know very well the direct relationship between forests. These are the watersheds, which upon which the waters are coming from, and anything that happens to the forest will have a direct impact on the water sources and the quality of water that indigenous peoples and the other dominant populations will receive. And maybe just last point, I just want to also say something about, you know, I'm very critical about it's very good that the constitutions of Ecuador have those, you know, the development of the recognition of the rights of Mother Earth, and of course, the conceptual nature of this basis of this development reflects respect for nature, which is embedded actually in most of indigenous cultures. And the way this has been developed shows again the contradiction of the paradigms that do not actually respect human rights. In Ecuador, in Bolivia, these constitutional references were done without the effective participation of indigenous peoples themselves. And of course now we see that they are not being implemented at all. I did an Ecuador visit. In fact, I made a report on Ecuador before the Human Rights Council a few months ago, and I cited specifically the fact that while they have a very good constitution, they have summa causa, the dominant economic path that they're still taking is extraction of natural resources, whether metals or minerals or oil. You know, so how do you reconcile that kind of reality with the existing good provisions in the Constitution and of course all their so-called programs? And so in the end, my conclusion is that really the human rights-based approach to water management, to conservation, you know, to all these things that are supposed to enhance indigenous people's practice and ontologies, how the human rights-based approach still has to be in the center of that. I know human rights is very anthropocentric, but for indigenous people's rights, you know, the Indigenous Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples is really an instrument that actually combines and consolidates, you know, both the rights of indigenous peoples as well as the rights of nature. So using that as a framework is really something that can help significantly the work that you are going to do in this project. And of course, your inclusion of the UN as one of your case studies is something that's also interesting for me, because you can also see this very much within the debates in the UN. And conclusion, I must say that having been part of the declaration, drafting of the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, these debates have been discussed over and over again, and that's why the inclusion of the respect for indigenous people's traditional knowledge, for their natural resource management systems, etc., is really put there in the center of the declaration, which is of course again, to return to the foundation, it's the rights of indigenous peoples to self-determination. And I hope you all the best in this project, and I will certainly help in any way that I can, you know, but I will also really be, I'm very critical, really, seriously, frankly, about this rights to nature thing, and I'm sincerely wanting to see you come up with some ways ahead in terms of dealing with these conflicts that we see between these two legal frameworks. Thank you.
Bueno, muchísimas gracias, Vicky. Siguiendo con esta charla privilegiada, ahora vamos a escuchar a Anne Norgan. I will switch to English, because this time is in English. She's a Finnish Sami politician, member of the Sami Parliament of Finland since 2000, and current chair of the United Nations Permanent Forum of Indigenous Issues since April 2019, after being elected in the 18th session. She has also chaired the Sami Council. She was born in Utske, I cannot pronounce that, but something like that, and has a master's degree in law and is a public law researcher at the University of Lapland, particularly on Sami law. She has 2 daughters, it's more detailed, and she's member of the United Nations Permanent Forum, as we mentioned, since June 2016. Representing the Arctic indigenous Sami and Inuit. That's correct. Well, I will not make more question, I think, because the description of the project and what you already know, I think is challenging enough. But if you have advices, or what are the main challenges that you see, because it will be 5 years working on this, I think you will focus in two countries, but in fact it's something that will have impact worldwide. What is your first impression of what will happen with this? What are the challenges? Please.
Thank you. And first of all, allow me to thank for the invitation of this event, for the publication. And this theme especially interests me because I'm brought up on a river, since I come from the fishing Sami family. So I have fished all my life and still continue fishing, although nowadays it's mostly illegally, but that's a different issue. I'm very glad to see that you're starting this kind of research project, and I'm glad also to see that the European Research Council is seeing the importance of the indigenous rights and the movement, and how that is that they are funding this kind of research work. And as Vicky said, it is really important that you include the indigenous peoples in the all ways of the project, in both as researchers as also evaluating your project and seeing what happens afterwards. And if you are then thinking of continuation of the project, research project or something else. And also education, which is, I guess you have courses on besides this project, so you involve the indigenous scholars and students, and also organize them scholarships to attend to the courses. That's very important when it comes to the indigenous world. And it's good to hear that this about the South to South dialogue, and also North to South dialogues. They are very important for us to learn when we come to the North. And also it's important to have the aspect of indigenous to indigenous cooperation in this field. And I guess it comes from Nepal to Colombia and Colombia to Nepal. And if you haven't been thinking that, there is a small, maybe a perspective you could take into account that you organize these kind of things. And what I have been working with in my home area is that building up an governance for river management and the salmon management. And we have found in our work that it is easy to build an administrative structure and to have the participation of indigenous peoples. But the most difficult question in our management of the river is how to include the traditional knowledge into the management system, because the management of the traditional knowledge doesn't follow the Western ways of thinking of administration and so on. So that's challenging, how to take into account the indigenous traditional knowledge. Well, for example, in managing how many fishing licenses you can allow or give in some certain period of time. And predators, all that other things which have influence, managing the predators how to manage the level of predators when managing the fishing stocks. That has been our dilemma, because we don't have access to the legislation, and therefore it's difficult to compare the Western science and the indigenous knowledge into the management. And I'd like to, when it comes to the permanent forum, we have been, our theme of our next session is Sustainable Development Goal 16, which is peace, access to justice, and strong institutions. And that's, we are discussing that in next April in New York. And one of the discussion themes is on reconciliation and transnational justice. And so it's a part of your research not maybe the major part, but one of the subparts of your research. And therefore, I'd like to invite you to hold a side event in our meeting to present the project. And as Vicky stated, it is very important for indigenous peoples to see how to push for the better implementation of the indigenous peoples' rights and rights to self-determination. And I invite you to present the ongoing cases. You mentioned Colombia, and if there are some in Nepal, and then that to have that as an awareness raising an example for our other indigenous peoples, so that they can use your presenting your cases as examples in their work for promoting the rights of indigenous peoples. So, thank you. Sorry, I don't know that well about your the project itself, so I couldn't really comment the research questions and so on, but maybe later on when I get to see the project proposal incomplete. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now I will switch to Spanish again. Y tenemos también el privilegio de estar con Belkis Florentina Izquierdo Torres, mujer indígena del pueblo Iku de Colombia, magistrada de la Sala de Reconocimiento de Verdad y de Responsabilidad y Determinación de Hechos y Conductas, este es el nombre completo, y coordinadora de la Comisión Étnico-Racial de la Jurisdicción Especial para la Paz en Colombia. Ella es abogada por la Universidad Nacional de Colombia, tiene una maestría en Administración Pública con énfasis en Gobernabilidad y Políticas Públicas de la Escuela Superior de Administración Pública de Colombia. Se ha desempeñado como magistrada auxiliar del Consejo Superior de la Judicatura, asesora de la Presidencia de la República de Colombia, consultora del Programa de Naciones Unidas para el Desarrollo, el PNUD, y asesora jurídica de diferentes entidades públicas y privadas. Y su experiencia ha estado enmarcada en el diálogo cultural. Es la primera mujer indígena en Colombia que ostentó una alta dignidad dentro de la judicatura cuando se desempeñó en el cargo de magistrada auxiliar del Consejo Superior de la Judicatura, que fue antes de ser nombrada, y en el caso de Colombia es importante, fueron audiencias por concurso, y al cual uno podía ver los exámenes, estuvo muy estudiosa, como se dice en Colombia, muy juiciosa para prepararse. O sea, ella se ganó su puesto como magistrada de la Jurisdicción Especial de la Paz. Sus esfuerzos se han centrado en visibilizar y posicionar la Jurisdicción Especial Indígena en Colombia bajo las premisas de autonomía indígena en materia de justicia como un derecho fundamental, el fortalecimiento de la coordinación interjurisdiccional entre los sistemas de derecho indígena, la jurisdicción ordinaria y ahora la Jurisdicción Especial para la Paz. La defensa constante de los derechos de las mujeres, la niñez y la materialización de la interseccionalidad de los enfoques étnicos, territoriales y de género. Entonces les dejo la palabra en manos de Belkis.
Un saludo muy especial para todos. Creo que es el momento del retorno al origen. Y pues primero agradecerles a todos, a los coordinadores de este importante proyecto. En nuestro pueblo siempre dicen que nada es una casualidad, siempre nos encontramos porque tenemos una misión que cumplir. Me siento muy feliz de estar con este panel tan bonito de mujeres indígenas y no indígenas de diferentes partes del mundo. Esto nos permite hacer una gran red internacional en distintos puntos del mundo para desde las montañas más altas seguir fortaleciendo el pensamiento y la resistencia de los pueblos. Entonces quiero conversarles un poco qué venimos haciendo en Colombia respecto al tema de la materialización de los derechos colectivos. Y cuando hablo de la materialización de los derechos colectivos, en el centro está el territorio. En el centro, porque tenemos que mirarlo desde un principio integral, donde está el agua, la tierra, el fuego, el aire, todo está circulando y todo está vivo. Eso, en esto coincidimos todos los pueblos en el mundo, y por eso a nosotros desde muy pequeños nos recuerdan que somos guardianes de vida. Es una misión la que debemos cumplir. Y en esto separar la naturaleza del humano, separar el pueblo del territorio, es muy delicado, porque creo que hay pueblos que nos forman desde muy pequeños y que nuestra cosmovisión y nuestros principios están orientados precisamente a cómo nos relacionamos con ciertos sitios sagrados para que se siga reproduciendo la vida de todos, no solo del humano, sino de todos los seres. Y esa es una forma de pensar y de concebir el mundo. Por eso, ¿cómo se pagan los sitios sagrados? ¿Cómo se interrelaciona y se interconecta? Y ahora que conocía también al amigo, al compañero indígena de Nepal, dice, no, tenemos mucho interés de conocer el Himalaya, allá los mamos, los maestros también hablan del Himalaya, de esas grandes montañas que son grandes sabios. Y esa forma de comprender y de creer que todo eso está vivo, tenemos que seguirlo fortaleciendo. Y ahí, hace como 3 años que nos conocimos con Lieselotte, cuando en el marco del fortalecimiento de los sistemas de justicia propio, siendo que en Colombia la Corte Constitucional tiene una jurisprudencia muy avanzada en los derechos colectivos y ahora en algunos reconocimientos de ríos, como el río Atrato de la Amazonía, como derechos, los derechos que tienen estos seres. En ese momento había muchos cuestionamientos. La justicia ordinaria, por ejemplo, pensaba, y en esto el Consejo Superior de la Judicatura, que hay ciertos bienes jurídicos que la justicia indígena no tutela. ¿Por qué? Porque siempre hay unos prejuicios, hay unas estigmatizaciones de cómo el mundo mayoritario mira a los pueblos indígenas. Y creo que allí se generó toda una tarea para comenzar a explicar por qué en el marco de nuestros propios pueblos, los niños, la familia, la mujer, la familia y todas las generaciones, que tenemos que pensar en generaciones futuras, es fundamental, y es desde allí que tenemos que comenzar a plantear los intereses superiores. Entonces hay que diferenciar bajo qué lógica y bajo qué racionalidad nos estamos dialogando. Y allí es donde una de las palabras claves siempre fue el diálogo intercultural. Un diálogo intercultural que nos permita reconocernos, pero que nos permita también, no desde la teoría solamente, sino desde la materialidad del relacionamiento, que existen otros conocimientos, que existen otras formas de ver la vida, de interrelacionarnos, y que es necesario entonces respetarla. Y fue allí cuando todo el tema de los sistemas de justicia propio, que tienen educación, que tienen medicina tradicional, porque es que como cuando hablamos de justicia, y tal vez y aquí aprovechando que hay indígenas de distintas partes, del mundo, nuestro ejercicio como mujeres indígenas de lograr que del otro lado nos entiendan, de avanzar en el tema de la interculturalidad, a veces nos pasa al otro lado y no estamos hablando desde nuestros propios principios y desde nuestros propios pueblos. Y es allí donde tendremos que tener un gran cuidado de buscar un punto de equilibrio para que, si bien cuando hagamos nuestras propuestas desde la justicia, desde la educación, desde la salud, lo planteemos desde nuestros propios pueblos, porque si bien tenemos muchos principios o muchas cosas en común, también tenemos unas particularidades que será necesario entonces también protegerlas y cuidarlas. Y en ese sentido, el diálogo que hoy, en el marco de la justicia transicional, de la Jurisdicción Especial para la Paz, se han tenido grandes logros porque se han incorporado instrumentos normativos que recogen, por un lado, la Constitución política, el desarrollo de la jurisprudencia de la Corte Constitucional, pero también el capítulo étnico del acuerdo final, que tiene unas salvaguardas muy importantes que están relacionadas con esa importancia de hacer, uno, la consulta previa, dos, de hacer todo un proceso de reconocimiento de la existencia de la jurisdicción especial indígena. Y todos estos marcos normativos han sido hoy incorporados en la Jurisdicción Especial para la Paz y en general en el sistema. Normas como el reglamento interno de la Jurisdicción Especial, que fue sometido a consulta previa, ha sido fundamental para fortalecer una legitimidad en los territorios, para incorporar herramientas que nos permitan también, dentro del ejercicio de la justicia propia, ir llevando también las justicias de los pueblos indígenas. Hoy, con estas herramientas, necesitamos dar el gran salto. Y este salto importante, que creo que muchas veces lo hemos hablado con Lieselotte, es cómo materializamos, cómo en la práctica logramos hacer transformaciones. Y creo que el primer punto es que debemos estar muy convencidos, estar interiorizados. Y como me decía un mamo, nunca se vaya a sentir sola, usted es pensamiento de agua, de tierra y de fuego, usted está posesionando ese pensamiento en los distintos espacios donde tiene que ir, porque esto es una misión que tenemos porque somos guardianes de vida. Cuando uno logra interiorizar eso, sabemos que eso no va a ser fácil, pero creo que este gran proyecto va a ser una oportunidad también para comenzar a fortalecernos como grandes redes. Y entonces, cuando nos pensamos desde la Jurisdicción Especial para la Paz, en mirar qué pasó en el marco del conflicto armado, estamos planteando todos los crímenes que se han cometido también contra el territorio y contra la naturaleza. Derrames de petróleo, fumigaciones, y todo esto ha venido afectando el territorio en sí mismo y su relacionamiento con los pueblos, con el derecho a la salud, a la alimentación. Y esto no ha sido nuevo, porque ya la Corte Constitucional y la Corte Suprema de Justicia, desde el 2011, el 2015, el 2016, hay jurisprudencia avanzada donde se están reconociendo los derechos de los ríos, de la Amazonía. Pero ¿qué está pasando también? El tema de la implementación, el tema del seguimiento. Por ejemplo, en el caso de Chocó, allá la Corte Constitucional planteó una figura de guardianes, pero si no es una figura de protección que sea parte del propio territorio y del propio pueblo, de todas maneras es una herramienta externa. Entonces, aquí la justicia transicional también tiene ese gran desafío de recoger el conocimiento territorializado, de recoger lo que proponen los pueblos, de recoger y fortalecer el conocimiento en los propios territorios. para no comenzar a armar cosas nuevas, sino es el empoderamiento local y el control territorial que los pueblos indígenas tienen en todos los sentidos, porque eso hay que entenderlo así, desde lo espiritual, lo cultural, lo social, lo político y ahora en lo jurídico. Y tenemos las herramientas. Hoy, ¿cuál es los avances que tenemos? Nos estamos en el marco de todo lo que ha pasado en el conflicto armado, iniciamos un proceso de acreditación del sujeto colectivo de derecho pueblo, porque la Jurisdicción Especial para la Paz también se viene proponiendo dignificarnos desde el lenguaje, hablar de pueblos, ya no hablar solo de grupos, hablar de coordinación interjurisdiccional, entendiendo que los pueblos indígenas que están en su territorio ancestral tienen su autoridad, tienen sus normas y procedimientos y que es necesario fortalecer su autogobierno. Pero eso tiene que ser una realidad. Cómo eso se cruza también con un enfoque diferente respecto al desarrollo y al progreso. Y ahí encontramos una cantidad de paradojas, una cantidad de conflictos que comienzan a surgir. Y creo que eso no solamente es en Colombia, eso son en muchas partes. Y cada vez que nos escuchamos, uno como dice, bueno, aquí también tenemos la resistencia, tenemos que hacerla juntos. Entonces, acreditaciones como pueblos, recoger cómo piensan los pueblos que han sido dañados, cuál es su concepto de daño colectivo e individual, y inmediatamente lo primero que están referenciando es la profanación de los sitios sagrados. Y nos decían los guías espirituales, las autoridades espirituales, los maestros, el territorio está vivo, está interconectado y el conocimiento de los pueblos es territorializado. Y entonces no podemos dejarnos amputar, como ir amputando el cuerpo. Porque nosotros, que somos el primer territorio sagrado, así mismo es el territorio, entonces tenemos que comenzar a protegerlo. Y no desde la timidez, tenemos que comenzar a juntarnos también para hacer todas las estrategias, todas las visibilizaciones. Y hoy la Jurisdicción Especial, bien acreditamos como pueblo, pero también estamos revisando todos los avances y revisando el derecho propio para lanzarnos hacia la acreditación de los territorios como víctimas. Y esto no es nada nuevo. Desde la ley de víctimas, en el 2011, que se generaron 2 decretos, leyes muy importantes. El decreto ley 4633, que fue ampliamente consultado con los pueblos indígenas, el 4635 con los pueblos afrocolombianos. Allí se planteó algo muy importante y es mirar el territorio como una víctima. Es importante, entonces, cada vez evidenciar, generar jurisprudencia que permita afirmar nuestra relación inescindible de los pueblos indígenas, de la vida de los pueblos con sus territorios, con el agua, con sus sitios sagrados, porque solo así podremos permanecer física y culturalmente. Y ustedes saben que en Colombia la misma Corte Constitucional lo ha declarado, y es la extinción física y cultural de más de 34 pueblos, y esa es una realidad, porque podemos quedar como unos cascarones, nos decían nuestras autoridades espirituales. Es necesario conectarnos con el origen, es necesario conectarnos, por eso cuando nosotros nacemos, nuestra placenta, nuestro ombligo, se hace un rito y se registra en el territorio porque somos hijos de la madre. Ese es un tema muy importante. Y entonces, cuando nos desplazan, cuando no podemos estar en nuestros territorios, cuando no podemos ejercer nuestra ritualidad, hay vulneraciones de muchos derechos. Y creo que en esto fue acertada la Corte Constitucional en la medida que afirmó que los daños de los pueblos indígenas y los pueblos afrocolombianos, raizales, palenqueros y rum, eran unas afectaciones diferenciadas y desproporcionadas. Y es precisamente porque tenemos una cosmovisión, tenemos un territorio y también el conflicto afectó de manera distinta esto. Y recuerdo que en Colombia el 4.4%, que eso es bueno recordarlo porque uno a veces, pues tantos países no ubica, el 4.4% de la población en Colombia pertenece a pueblos indígenas y hacemos presencia en el 31 o 30% del territorio colombiano, donde el conflicto se desarrolló con mucho más fuerza. Y hoy existe el sistema integral, está la jurisdicción especial para la paz avanzando en lo que le corresponde. Sin embargo, no todo el territorio está en posconflicto. La gran mayoría y sobre todo los territorios donde están asentados los pueblos indígenas siguen en conflicto. Podemos hablar de Nariño, podemos hablar del Cauca. ¿Cómo transformar estas realidades? Y entonces allí la resistencia tiene que ser en todos los niveles. Y una parte, creo que así lo dijo Kelly, nuestra resistencia también tiene que darse desde la academia, desde los espacios políticos, de los espacios sociales, culturales y desde el centro que es lo espiritual. Entonces todo esto tendrá que estar interrelacionado. Hoy Colombia tiene una gran oportunidad, una oportunidad de oro y es, por un lado, materializar los derechos colectivos de los pueblos, reconociendo toda la sabiduría ancestral que existe allí, pero también reconocer todos los daños y todas las afectaciones que se han generado. Y nosotros en nuestra doble condición, como indígenas, primero, que nosotros nos ubicamos como guardianes de vida, y segundo, como magistrados para el país, tendremos que llevar este gran mensaje también a la sociedad en general. Por eso consideramos como una parte de la reparación tiene que ser cátedras interculturales, un sistema educativo que enseñe cuál es la historia de los pueblos, cuáles son los conocimientos que tenemos, cuál ha sido nuestra resistencia, una resistencia pacífica, porque nuestra resistencia siempre ha sido la palabra, el conocimiento y siempre esa capacidad de diálogo. Repararnos significa entonces quitarnos una estigmatización tan grande que hemos tenido de ser actores armados, de ser ilegales, de ser etcétera, etcétera. Entonces, hoy nuestra gran tarea, la Jurisdicción Especial para la Paz, con ese gran orgullo, somos 38 magistrados, de los cuales 8 somos magistrados étnicos, 4 que pertenecen a comunidades afrocolombianas y 4 que pertenecemos a pueblos indígenas. Y esto tendrá que marcar alguna diferencia, y esa diferencia es de un juez transicional que tiene que estar trabajando desde los territorios, acompañando también los procesos, con una visión de ponderación de derechos, con una visión de la realidad de lo que pasa, de analizar también las causas estructurales, porque somos conscientes de que la justicia transicional, 15 años pasan muy rápido, pero tendremos que dejar un grano de arena y es el fortalecimiento de los sistemas de justicia propio en los pueblos y de generar un nuevo diálogo intercultural y una coordinación interjurisdiccional diferente. Porque en Colombia desde el 91 se reconoció la jurisdicción especial indígena. Sin embargo, no ha sido posible que todos los jueces interioricen que del otro lado también hay otro juez, hay una autoridad, hay unas normas, hay unos procedimientos. Entonces, creo que este tema tenemos que trabajarlo en todos los niveles, seguir sensibilizando, concientizando, pero también exigiendo nuestros derechos. Y aquí creo que hay un tema de doble vía, derechos y obligaciones. Y en eso a nosotros como pueblos indígenas, y tengo la gran oportunidad, y bueno, soy muy privilegiada de hacer parte del pueblo arhuaco de la Sierra Nevada de Santa Marta, de los 4 pueblos donde nosotros decimos que somos el corazón del mundo. Sin embargo, este corazón del mundo también está solicitado en concesión minera. Hay muchas concesiones, muchas solicitudes para hacer la extracción de minas en este territorio. Y eso para nosotros es muy doloroso. Pareciera que tenemos grandes avances normativos, pero hoy es necesario comenzar a materializarlo. Yo creo que es suficiente el marco normativo que tenemos. Ahora tenemos que juntarnos en redes y yo felicito a Lieselotte por este proyecto tan bonito, porque nos da también esta oportunidad de fortalecernos, de juntar redes, y esto es un tema intercultural. Siempre nos enseñan y nos recuerdan que la defensa que hacemos los pueblos ancestrales en cualquier parte del mundo es una defensa de la vida de todo el planeta, no solo para nosotros. Entonces, cada vez me convenzo más que ese debe ser el camino, por eso comencé por decir el retorno al origen, el retorno a los principios. Y pues le agradezco a los seres divinos por darme la oportunidad de conocerlos a todos, de compartir con ustedes estas palabras y de reforzarme también con sus palabras. Muchísimas gracias.
Bueno, muchas gracias, Belkis. Y siguiendo con la sesión privilegiada, ahora vamos a escuchar a Danbar Shemhom. Hay que pasarle por el micro, por favor. Y también voy a hacer nuevamente el switch al inglés porque está en inglés. He is currently the head of the Central Department of Anthropology at the Tribhuvan University. That's correct pronunciation, I'm not sure. In Nepal. He holds an MA from Tribhuvan University, Master in Philosophy from the University of Bergen, Norway, and a PhD from the Cornell University of the USA. His doctoral dissertation seeks to answer how and why the Limbus indigenous peoples in Nepal claim and quest for the Limbuwan province on the basis of history, territory, and collective identity simultaneously, resisting the dominant and colonial Hindu state of Nepal. He was a member of the Electoral Constituency Delineation Commission, Nepal, between 2007 and 2013. He was a member of National Intangible Cultural Council between 2012 and 2014, and he writes on the issues of identity, nation, territorial, and colonial situation facing the indigenous peoples in Nepal. Damba.
Thank you, Guillermo, for a nice introduction. I'm really thankful to the project organizers, coordinators, particularly Lieselotte, for inviting me to participate in this project launching program of the project Rivers. This is my first time coming to Spain and talking people from around the world. Also, I would like to thank the project designer, proposal designer, Lieselotte, for including Nepal as one of the field sites to implement your project. So I would also like to congratulate you for having won this great project, which I'm sure is going to generate kind of alternative knowledge or different kind of knowledge in terms of legal pluralism, cultural pluralism, and also multiple ontologies amongst the indigenous peoples around the world in understanding, in perceiving their nature or nature-human relationships on the whole. Myself, I belong to one of the indigenous societies in Nepal, which is Limbu, but I make my living by mostly speaking English and doing anthropology, teaching anthropology. Doesn't mean that I do not bring the indigenous people's issues and their problems into discussion with my students in the class. So my expertise, as I grew up a Limbu indigenous people, Limbu indigenous person, I basically try to do my academic exercise, basically focusing on indigenous issues in Nepal. Nepalese scholars, academics, historians, political scientists, basically who belong to the dominant groups or the state makers, keep saying that Nepal was never colonized by the Western power. But as a matter of fact, Nepal was ideologically colonized by the Britishers, ideologically. Not practically and politically, but ideologically. They were subservient of the British colonizers who were in India. So they served our rulers in the past. For the past 2.5 centuries, served the British power when they were in India, or now they are in England, back in England. But there is double colonizing situation in Nepal in the context that basically the Hindu rulers made the Hindu state of Nepal. And when they founded the Hindu state of Nepal in the late 18th century, they founded the Hindu state of Nepal by eliminating the indigenous people's own political autonomies, and by incorporating the indigenous people's political autonomy into the Hindu system of framework. So nowadays, those non-Hindus who did have their own political, cultural, customary laws and lives are now known as indigenous peoples. So Nepal has about now officially 38% of the total population as categorized as officially known as the indigenous peoples. So those 38% of the indigenous peoples comprise now 59 different indigenous groups of societies. It is going to be increased, but until now, the government of Nepal officially has recognized 59 different indigenous groups. Some of them are really large in terms of population. Some of them are small. My own group of indigenous people comprise about 1.6% of the total population. Nepal's total population is about 2.7, 2.8 million in total. So my population is about 500,000. We basically inhabit the easternmost part of Nepal. About the project, this reverse project, legal pluralism sounds very interesting to me. I don't have legal background, but from anthropological vantage and knowledge, my understanding is that the formal state laws are basically founded and designed by destroying, by eliminating the customary laws of the indigenous peoples, number one. Number two, in Nepal's case, what the formal laws, what the state laws we do have now, be it in relation to the nature, be it in relation to the jurisprudence, whatever it is, they are basically based on the Hindus' ways of life. The Hindu high caste people are the rulers of Nepal now. So they claim themselves to be the founders of the modern Nepal. So in this case, I see the contradiction between the customary laws of the indigenous people, be it understanding, perceiving the nature, water, forest, and lands, and also in terms of governing our own lives. So there is a contradiction between the customary laws of the indigenous peoples and the formal laws promulgated by the state. So, of course, my point is that state laws, the formal laws become official, effective, and institutionalized by destroying the customary laws of the indigenous peoples in general, elsewhere in the world, or particularly in Nepal as well. So probably when the reverse project is taking into consideration, undertaking its research in Nepal, this kind of contradictions and the dialectics between the customary laws and the formal laws would take into account. This would be my advice, my suggestion for the project implementers. In terms of understanding indigenous peoples and their understanding of the life and the nature, this idea of understanding nature, having life, having the life force, and having the spirit in itself is fundamentally different from the way the Western world understand the nature. So, indigenous people, I'm arguing this by experience of my own life, by observing my own mother, how she behaves with nature, how she perceives nature. Not necessarily my father and grandfather, but my mother and my grandmother, because my father and grandfather were local political leaders. Chieftain, my grandfather was a local chieftain. So they were so much ingrained with this patriarchal, political idea. But the women, basically, mother, grandmother, are very close to understanding the nature, having spirits, life, soul. So, So probably the rivers project, while implementing it in Nepal, would try to conceptualize how indigenous people basically understand nature in a ontologically, cosmologically, in a fundamentally different way than the Western world, like than the academic world. We do the academic. We do have like graduates in anthropology, in law, we go to university. So probably our internalization of the nature is perhaps different. So why I'm giving this example is like I studied so much about how we own land, we own forest. So we get actually official certificates of owning particular patch of land from the state administration. But indigenous people's life seems to be owned by their nature. Land owns us, water owns us. This is why indigenous people, like my own society, worships nature of having being protected, defended, prevented, and made our life successful and healthy. When my mom becomes sick, we usually have to get a shaman rather than taking her to hospital first, modern hospital first. Shaman comes and he chants some mantras and he, tells her that had you today gone to that patch of forest, gone to that part of water, maybe you step onto this sacred part of water. That is why that particular waterfall became angry, and now you got to promise one chicken or one goat or maybe a piglet to offer to the divinity. Then, so what sense I try to make out of this, having done anthropology in my academic school, is that indigenous people's understanding of nature is absolutely inalienable from their life. So when Lieselotte was showing us the list of the categories, you have mentioned the interdependency. Probably you might want to add inalienability, that indigenous people's lives is inalienable from the Mother Earth, water, these kind of issues. So indigenous people's lives, their societies are actually owned and protected by the natures. So this is where I think your terms, ontologies, not ontology, but various ontologies, indigenous ontologies become relevant in terms of implementing the project, both in Colombia and Nepal. Another point I wanted to mention here was on human rights. I, having come from Nepal, and Nepal having finalized its constitution only 3-4 years ago, Nepal drafted it, finalized its constitution of Nepal, of Republic of Nepal. Only in 2015, after having seen 10 years of Maoist war, that actually abolished the monarchy and established the Republic of Nepal. So that was the kind of moment and opportunity for the indigenous peoples to struggle, to try their best to inscribe the practice of collective right of the indigenous people in the constitution. Nepal's indigenous people's activists were not satisfied with the prevalent definition of human rights, which is based in Western liberal individualism, that individual rights are the fundamental and primary rights in terms of understanding social rights. But according to the indigenous people's collective life and their rights, looks like what makes the individuals humans? It is basically the human collectivity, the spirituality, the collective morality that makes us humans. So if you are defining human rights from the vantage of individual rights, it will not actually incorporate the collective living ways and collective life of the indigenous peoples. So, in advocating human rights, in my understanding, in my anthropological understanding, and from the understanding of my own society, we are trying to advocate these individual rights and trying to treat the indigenous peoples as having individual rights as their fundamental rights as well. I think that is our kind of academic weakness. So let's try to interrogate the concept of human rights as well, because I'm bringing this point from my study of anthropology. There was an American Anthropological Association already established, already founded by the year 1948. So when in US, when the UN drafting commission were working on drafting of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, they also tried to include the chair person of the American Anthropological Association, who was Melville Horskowitz at that time, by the way. And they declined to take part in the Human Rights Declaration drafting process because they said, you cannot have a universal definition of human rights. Human rights should be understood in a cultural context, so in a particular context. So this is why they did not participate, but nowadays we criticize them. They should have participated, they should have sort of, they should have tried to define it a rather different way by incorporating the collectiveness, collective morality, and collective identity of the human beings in terms of defining human rights. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Danbar. We started questions from this side, and I want to ask you a question, Lieselotte.
Thank you. You encouraged us to present questions, so I have one about the project. And it's about, I'm jumping far ahead now, but it's about the results. And when you have the results of the research project, would you produce recommendations to different UN bodies? And if you would, how would you present them also in different meetings of the UN bodies? Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Anne, for that question. Yeah, the European Research Council asked to this kind of big projects to have impact and output and results. And fortunately, the European Research Commission does not interpret that in a very mainstream academic narrow way of what we normally produce as outputs. That is books and academic articles in international index journals, doing conferences, participating in big academic conferences. That's normally the mainstream output that we should do as academics. But as I just said, the ERC is very concerned about the impact on society of this kind of projects, and that goes much more beyond than pure academic impact. So yes, the project has foreseen to, in those next 5 years, to collaborate with, for example, the Office of the Mandate Holder of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, if there is interest from that office, to collaborate in certain guidelines. As we are in the setup, I'm really happy that you asked me that question, because I would love to hear from you, from the UN Permanent Forum, if there would be interest to hear our results and to find ways how our results can be communicated to a much broader public and indigenous communities over the world than just the academic part. And like yesterday evening, we were talking with Vicky about, for example, the topic of ethics, because the European Research Commission is forcing us to apply very strict ethics guidelines, which I think is a huge step forward for social scientists, but we are not really used to comply with that kind of legal obligation. And one of the main ethics that we need to comply with as an ERC research project is informed consent with all the people that we're going to collaborate with, which is obviously great, because that will force us to indeed to collaborate on a more conscious way with indigenous peoples, because from an anthropological traditional way, well, anthropology is born from a colonial imperialistic view on the global south, and we go to communities and there is a more, well, a tradition raised from more an extractive way of doing research. And one of the concerns of this project is indeed from how can we transform that colonial legacy within anthropology and collaborating with indigenous peoples. So I would be very interesting to hear from, for example, the mandate holder, the UN Permanent Forum, if that would be a topic that we as a research project of 5 years from academia can support on critically thinking about ethics and how to do research among indigenous communities, as we're going to work in the field among 2 continents. And that might be one of the other topics, but probably there might be other topics that from the UN spaces or body might be interested in how, as a research project, we can contribute and putting a bit more academic input in political debates. So yes, I would love to continue with that conversation and hear your needs and interests.
There's more questions.
Okay, I know we don't have much time, but this is something that I would like you to take into account. You know, we are talking here about interculturality, interdependence, you know, and all these things. Interculturality, intercultural dialogue is really a key concept that indigenous peoples are brought into the picture, but now it's like it has become so meaningless because you don't really know what intercultural dialogue means, no? We talk about intercultural health, intercultural education, you know, etc. But what really is that? So I was wondering, is your project going to really, well, of course, to use a truly intercultural process, but will also define exactly how it will result into something that will be more concrete in terms of what intercultural dialogue means, especially, of course, from the perspective of indigenous peoples. It's a new sort of, it's a concept that has to keep coming up, but I mean, frankly, I don't still see any genuine practice of intercultural dialogue and intercultural, you know, education or health for that matter, and I hope this is something that's also in your minds when you are going to do this project.
Okay, thank you for this great question. Yeah, and as I mentioned in my presentation, it also, the whole idea of intercultural dialogue, what it is and how you do it, is one of the main challenges that I also seen in my own work as an academic at the UN, etc. And I see it as at the heart of the project of rivers. I used more the term of interlegal translation because we're going to work more at the legal level. And for example, in Nepal and Colombia, in work package B, we're going to focus more on understanding to what extent at court level, when there is the judicialization processes in Colombia and Nepal regarding the violation of collective rights of territory of water through extractive projects in the territory, to what extent the visions of indigenous communities are heard in the courts. And one of the tools that, and Colombia was one of the first countries that started to use that, is the role of an anthropological expert and reports. However, there's little empirical research done on to what extent this kind of translation tools to facilitate that kind of intercultural dialogue between judges and lawyers and then indigenous communities has been effective. What has been the main obstacles, what have been the challenges, and so on. So during those 5 years, we're going to focus more on intercultural dialogue within that spaces, and hopefully we can offer rich empirical data that will contribute to what have been the challenges, the pitfalls, and how we can actually, support the real intercultural dialogue and not put it like una salsa indígena, to put it in Spanish, like an indigenous flavor on top of everything, because indeed it is. It becomes a very shallow and empty concept.
More questions.
Cuando se plantea el derecho humano al agua, el agua la estamos volviendo humana. De acuerdo a los planteamientos que escucha uno de los distintos pueblos, hablamos del territorio, de la naturaleza, de todos sus, del agua, del aire, de los bosques, de las montañas. ¿Cómo desde el proyecto se logra realmente mantener una integralidad?
Gracias, Belkis, y gracias por esa pregunta súper profunda, muy compleja, y es justamente lo que queremos hacer a nivel de las comunidades indígenas, es entender esa interrelación de agua, que el agua está interconectado con todo el resto, y a pesar que el proyecto se enfoca desde el derecho humano al agua, queremos justamente cuestionar esta visión o interpretación hasta ahora del derecho humano al agua, que está limitado en una interpretación muy técnica de tener acceso a agua potable. Ese derecho humano está enfocado en lo que sale es el grifo, pero lo que queremos ver a nivel de las comunidades en Nepal y Colombia, en medio de los conflictos socioambientales por extractivismo, hidroeléctricas, es ir a la fuente del agua, ir a qué significa las fuentes de agua, los ríos, y con mi trabajo con los quechíes en Guatemala, explicaron que el agua, el nacimiento de agua es tan sagrado, y si están cortando todos los árboles alrededor, es quitar la ropa del ser de agua. Y ahí ya ves directamente esa interconexión entre agua, territorio, bosque, etc. Entonces esperemos que a lo largo de estos 5 años podamos visibilizar y entender mucho más la interconexión entre todo, a través de las historias de vida, a través de trabajar con las mujeres, porque efectivamente, como Dunbar ya mencionó, son sobre todo las mujeres que manejan el agua, levantan, utilizan el agua para lavarse, para lavar los hijos, para cocinar, van al río, etcétera, hasta que duermen. Y queremos dar esa voz mujer indígena dentro de ese proyecto. Entonces, ojalá en lo largo de los años podamos, con esos datos empíricos, de visibilizar esa interrelacionalidad, interdependencia mucho más.
Bueno, ¿vamos a tener que terminar o va a haber un...? Bueno, yo creo que cierras tú, que estás como anfitriona.
Pues, English. Sometimes I'm lost in translation. Well, thank you very much for being here in the first time, for having accepted the invitation, for traveling so far, to have interest in this project. And I hope that in the next 5 years we can continue with this dialogue. I know that there are many challenging questions on the table in this project. And as I said, it will be quite challenging, the whole project, and implementing it. But I do hope that in the next 5 years we can keep being in contact, that we can hear your advice, your input, and give us some guidance to keep us on the right path towards contributing the protection of indigenous peoples around the world. So thank you very much. Thank you for the public and everyone who's joining us to participate. You can follow the progress of the project on our website, on our Facebook. We have even a Twitter account. And the next 5 years, we're going to organize seminars and events, not only here in Madrid, but also in Colombia, also at the UN, also in Nepal. So if you're interested to see how it goes with us, then please stay tuned in. And thank you so much. And thank you so much for all your questions and your comments on the project. Muchas gracias.